We've got Todd McShay, host of The McShay Show. It has been really good. I don't know if that means I thought it wasn't going to be great, but it's been even better than I thought, which then feels
Thanks,
like a
man.
backwards compliment. Yeah, well, we're
I
both
got you.
from the West, though, so we understand.
I had
the
my
language you're
concerns too. Let's be honest.
Well, look, we have specific things that I want to get to. We're going to do just college because we're going to have so much NFL later on to close the season. So I just felt like there was so much to talk about with what's happened the last couple of weeks. So we're just going to do it again here. I cannot believe 48 hours, well, a little less, removed from Ohio State losing at home to Michigan. I cannot believe.
Wasn't that wild?
Football game. Michigan throws for, 60 plus yards, 62 yards in that game. We can get into the missed kicks and all the stuff. And like there was an interception off there for a little while. And the first 7 for Michigan is off that pick. But I can't believe after losing 3 in a row and watching Michigan all season being like they've gone through all the quarterbacks, they can't figure it out. No offense there. We can talk up rivalry too, like, hey, and that's certainly a factor in all this stuff and stuff we've seen the last couple of weeks. But my God, so you come out with a heater. You think Ryan Day is done?
Prior to Saturday, I thought it was all nonsensical noise, right? Like, look at his record, 47-1, I think it was, against all other Big Ten opponents, not named Michigan. What he's been able to build with this program, who he is as a coach. And you look at the last couple losses to Michigan, like somewhat understandable losses, right? To really good Michigan football teams. But Saturday was different. And it just can't happen. Like, it just can't happen. When you are clearly the better team, when you've raised the money for the $20 million roster or whatever it is, this is your year. It can't happen. Okay. And so it becomes the kind of the tip of the iceberg. And it's kind of like a divorce, right? Like, both parties may be wonderful people. They may be wonderful parents, but they just don't work together anymore. That's kind of how I view this, right? Like, and I'll say this, and you know how much respect I have for Ryan Day. My history going back to Richmond versus New Hampshire, like Chip Kelly, how much respect I have for Chip. And we're both obviously, have personal relationships with Chip. But beyond that, and I'm able to look beyond that, like as an offensive coordinator, you're not going to be able to find a better head coach, offensive coordinator, wide receiver coach combo than what Ohio State has right now. But I also understand this, and this is the most important part. Neither party is able to move forward together in a productive manner. That's, to me, the most important aspect of this. And that's why I mentioned a divorce. Like, when you have 2 great people, 2 great parents, but they can't function any longer together. And that's Ohio State, the university, the community, the boosters can no longer function together with Ryan Day and his staff. And it's like the 14th biggest city in America, but it's a small bubble when it comes to Columbus and Ohio State football. And with the noise, and I'm sure the absurd death threats and how it affects Ryan Day's family and all the pressures that go along with that position, Ryan Day no longer is able to function at the highest level that he can possibly function, remaining as the head coach of Ohio State. So when I come out and say, barring a national championship, I don't see how there's any chance that Ryan Day continues to be the head coach at Ohio State. I say it because I just don't think it can function any longer.
Look, a year ago when this stuff was happening after they lost to Michigan, 2 years ago, I think that Michigan loss of the previous 3 was the one I was like, how did they lose 2 years ago? Now that's completely trumped by what happened this weekend. And I had done a video, it was like, I felt like there were a lot of parallels where Harbaugh wasn't beating Ohio State in the beginning. They were actually a little closer, I think, than people were giving him credit for. They have the terrible COVID year, but Harbaugh brings all that attention upon himself. I think he dialed it down a little bit. My point was always like, why does everybody want Harbaugh fired? Like, if Michigan's totally fine with him, then that should be all we need to do. Like, what? And be careful what you wish for. And then the same stuff was happening with Ryan Day. This one's inexcusable, though. Like, this changes. I'm not saying fire Ryan Day today. Okay. They still have
No,
a chance
neither
to
am
win a
I.
national championship. Okay. For Christ's sakes. So I'm not saying that, but now I'm far more willing to understand the frustration, which I think at times is like completely misguided to I'm with Ohio State fans. Like, imagine Saturday going, how did it happen again? I don't understand. Like, look, I'm not play calling guy because I know there's a ton of stuff that's going on that I don't understand. But like Ryan Day got super pissed at Lou Holtz for saying that this wasn't a physical football team. The way they called plays last year on short yardage situations told you that they didn't love the way they blocked that stuff. And I know they're down the offensive lineman going to this matchup, but if you're down the offensive lineman, I didn't understand why there was a commitment to show that they could maybe push people
That
around.
was my biggest frustration.
That
Is
was the like Howard wasn't good. The pick is disastrous. The kick, I don't understand. And I'm saying this is like because I don't understand it. Why was there such a commitment to be like, we're still going to ground and pound these guys, especially like that side of the field where they were dealing with the turnover?
I think it was an inability to accept that we're not going to win this by being more physical and shove it down their throat. I truly do. And you listen to every interview after games, it's always about the physicality and how Ryan Day is proud of how physical this team is. But they go out and they recruit all these Ferraris on the outside. And so like it's okay. It's okay to utilize those weapons. But for some reason, and I think it was just the mentality coming in that we're bigger, badder, stronger, more physical than Michigan this year. We have to not only beat them, we got to beat them at their own game.
But yeah, but on the D line, if there's one thing that we knew about Michigan this year, it's that you're not. You're
But
good everywhere else,
but I'm
not
telling
against them.
you, so you self scout, right?
Yeah, yeah,
You
right.
self scout and you look at Michigan, you say, all right, Will Johnson continues to not play. So their best cornerback is out. Our best player, our best player is Jeremiah Smith. And arguably our second best player is one of our other top 5, 7 players in this team is Emeka Ibuka, the other wide receiver. And they, with 4 minutes left in the first half, they had a combined 4 targets. And so it clearly was this mentality inside that bubble that we are going to not only beat them, we're going to demoralize them and we're going to do it our way. And now I get it. Like you brought in Will Howard because, Chip's always, I remember asking Chip like 15 years ago, give me your, and I forget who their quarterback was at the time, but give me like your what you're looking at a quarterback.
Masoli.
Yeah, give me the guy who like you would want. What are you looking for in the quarterback position? He said Rajon Rondo. He's a Boston guy, and that was the Celtics point guard. He wants a mobile quarterback. He wants someone to distribute, and he wants that in his offense. And so they bring in Will Howard, and Will Howard has an element of that because of his good decision making in the run game, his run ability, and they don't trust him as much as a passer as they do in operating their run game. They bring in Quinshaw Judkins. They pair him up with Travion Henderson. This is going to be the year. But you go into game week preparation. You say, okay, we lost 2 week 1 starters on the offensive line. We're not the same group up front that we expected to be. And if Michigan has one, and I think they had one personnel advantage, especially with Colston Loveland also out at tight end, another first round. Michigan has 2 first-round prospects on that team. 2. Well, no, that's a lie.
No,
Sorry,
55 is the
sorry,
first round.
sorry. Yes, they're outside of the defensive tackles, and that's my point. Outside of the defensive tackles, they have 2 first-round prospects, and neither were in the game. Okay, Loveland and Will Johnson are out. And so you sit there on Sunday of last week as you're game prepping, and I know the game prep has gone on all year, but you're looking at your personnel and you're looking at their personnel and you say, okay, Michigan's got one advantage in this game personnel wise. Their defensive tackles against our beat up offensive line. But they just continue to run their head into a brick wall. It didn't make sense to me.
It still doesn't make sense. I can't believe, it's one thing if they had won 3 in a row against them, took them lightly, go in, looking ahead, hey, and all this kind of stuff. But I mean, you lose 3 in a row to them, they win a national championship, you do all this stuff this summer. I think Jeremiah Smith might be the best player in college football. I mean, he is
Could be.
such a stud at receiver. And Look, if nothing else is working, I know this sounds stupid, but it's like, is it worth it throwing to him once every resetting of the downs? Just be like, let's see, because we're probably going to get a PI half the time
A
anyway.
screen, yeah, a vertical shot,
Right.
whatever it is.
So after the game, and credit to Fox, by the way, for staying with the fight and all of the stuff,
Yes.
which led to the flag. And, sometimes you can see a network get out of something and it pisses you off. And I know what I would have to say if I were doing play by play. I'm never going to be a play by play guy, so I don't have to worry about it. You have to admonish it, with this no place, whatever. I'm entertained as shit. I love it. I love watching that stuff. I'm not saying it's right. Shouldn't happen after every game. Although I think these kids have so much hate going on as kind of semi-public figures, in some case massive public figures, that there's this release in a way because of how they're connected to so much shit talking, that I think that's some of what we're seeing. But then I saw a lot of just piling on Ohio State because they lose the football game, which I understand. But here's what I don't understand. If you're Jack Sawyer and those guys are going to do shit to your field because you lost, you're just supposed to let them do whatever you want. So him grabbing the field
Oh,
and
I
then
don't
being criticized, grabbing the flag on the field, and then after that, like I, I don't. I think there's a lot of people that were criticizing Ohio State no matter what happened, and if they had just let Michigan do this and throw this party and throw the flag into the ground over and over again, and nobody, then that would have been used against Ohio State too, to be like, these guys
I
didn't even show any fight and being disrespected. So I know it's not
I like
cool,
we
but
can't
I like it.
complain. We can't complain about NIL and transfer portal, and there's no loyalty to your college, and it's not like it used to be, and be the grumpy old man, right?
Yeah.
And then watch Jack Sawyer have so much pride that he's not going to allow that to happen on his field. Here's my greater issue in it. Did you watch Sark when Texas went to plant the flag? And I know it's different
Yeah.
because Michigan is the one that planted the flag. But did you watch Sark, how quickly he picked up on that, how quickly he ran over to midfield, and how quickly he got his players away from midfield so a fight did not break out?
I did see it, and it was impressive that his kids listened to him that quickly. Like, they went to do it, and as soon as he ran over, it was like, "We're not doing that, we're not doing that." Like, everybody, not to say that, like, there'd be other coaches where 100 kids would be like, "Whatever, coach, I don't care." But I also think that Michigan, Ohio State thing's different than
I
Texas and
no,
Texas.
I
And
agree, but
even with the A&M history in Texas, because there's a ton of history, and I'm not being dismissed. The Michigan, Ohio State one is just really, really nasty,
I
and I
got it,
think
but
it's
if you're Ryan Day, man, and I think part of the reason why Sark was
so it's
so
Day's fault?
I'm not saying, but you just talked about Fox and the broadcast and how great of a job they did. They also
Yeah.
did a great job, and part of it was luck, just the timing of it. But they happened to pan to Ryan Day at one point, and he looks at an assistant who's running by and says, "What happened?" Well, what happened was you guys were over by the band, getting ready to do what you unfortunately have to do even after a loss, and you sing the fight song or the team song, whatever it is.
Which has to be the worst
Oh
time
my
in college
gosh! I
athletics.
was as
Yeah.
they were lining up, I'm like, they really got to do it now. But you see a bunch of your players, like the vast majority of your players, go racing over to midfield, and then you ask 5 minutes later, what happened? Like, what did? And I get it. His world is crashing down. He's worried about his family, his future. I can't believe, like, he's absolutely in shock, like a traumatic shock, right? But at some point, you got to take. There's institutional control. Like, you're the captain of the ship, and so I don't know. And I'm not blaming it all on Day. I'm just saying it felt like
No, I get your
very
point.
unfortunate timing where he's saying what happened, and then you watch Sark like 8 hours later, and it's the same thing that's on the line. Sark is motivated by doing the right thing, but also highly motivated by the fact that, all right, if this happens, we're looking at suspensions if a fight breaks out, and that could affect us either in the SEC championship and or in the playoff. And for Ohio State, like, I don't know if there's going to be suspensions that are handed out, but if there are, it's not going to be in the Big Ten championship because they're not playing in it. It's going to be in the college football playoff.
Okay, I wanna talk Texas a little bit because I think SEC Hardo and all of the SEC and the
I
conference
love
stuff to me
Hardo.
is very political. No, but I just think it's all political. Like, no one's ever changing their mind, and the cost of eggs is gonna be either something that's bad or good, and everybody's just gonna be full of shit.
Yep.
So when Texas is coming to the SEC Hardo is like, "Oh, good luck. Good luck lining up against these guys," and all that kind of stuff. So that was stupid. The SEC Hardo who doesn't think any of the bowl losses ever count because players declare for the draft, but then they'll run around like crazy when they beat the Big Ten in some of the matchups, right?
Mhm.
So that stuff is really annoying. So I know that Texas fans had to do that. I think sane people looked at Texas going, "Oh, okay, they're probably going to be pretty good." And you could do a little of the scheduling stuff where there's 7 SEC teams that won 9 games this year. Texas is one of them. So you take the other 6 9-win SEC teams, Texas played 1. Like, again, Texas's SEC experience is not even close to what Georgia's was. But I thought that was a dominant win. I thought they were a good football team all season. But the other side, the anti-SEC Hardo, let's say that's the phrase, just to keep it simple here, would suggest that Texas coming into the SEC and winning it immediately is a knock on the SEC. And I thought, well, I guess if a new team comes into a conference and wins it in the first year, like, what does that say for the conference? Now, granted, the SEC is held up higher, so therefore it's held to a higher standard, so that maybe it's more damning there. Do you want to run through who won the other conferences off the top of your head?
Do I want to run through who won the other
Who won the
conference?
Big Ten?
Like in the regular season?
Yeah, yeah,
Oregon.
right.
Okay.
Who won the Big 12 in the regular season?
Is it BYU?
It's Arizona State.
Oh, Arizona State. Yeah, Arizona State. Yeah, sorry.
The ACC. Do you know who won the ACC?
SMU.
SMU. 4 teams,
Mhm. That's a
all
good
in their
point.
first
I
year.
never thought about that.
Yeah. So the counter would be, again, well, the SEC is the one everybody talks all this shit about. I just never really quite understood that. I didn't think us like I didn't watch Texas being like, yeah, they'll be bad. But I think weirdo SEC guy probably was in some prideful way. Um, I don't have more on that. That was just a point.
No,
Unless you have more.
it's actually a good point. I hadn't thought about it, and I didn't look at it universally in the other conferences. I do think, yeah, it's political. I get what you're saying, and I think I also think the same SEC Hardo who was saying, wait till Texas has to play this SEC schedule and they can't hold up week in and week out, is now saying, well, look at Texas. They're another great team in the SEC. and we're a deeper, better conference than everybody. So, yeah, I mean, it's always going to be pitched at that angle. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
That's it.
I'm glad we touched on it.
Because SMU has a little scheduling thing going on here too. Like SMU, I already mentioned it in the top 12 thing, but if you go through like the top ACC schools, they didn't. So sometimes I wonder, like, did we have a playoff result where it was like who had the easiest time in their now ridiculous, completely unfair schedules? But anyway, I love Notre Dame. I think I
Interesting.
finally got there with it. I don't
Why
know that I'm
this
picking them
week?
to win
Because
the whole thing.
I saw, I was texting with Pollock yesterday, and I think he's in a similar boat. I think it's been hard to gauge how good Notre Dame is. I think they looked awesome early. They got a big win against A&M. Then it's like, oh gosh, it's not going to be a good year. Poor Marcus Freeman, like him, but is this going to work with the Northern Illinois loss? And then it feels like they've steadily gotten better and better as the season's progressed. My argument is, and it's not even an argument. I guess my trepidation with Notre Dame right now is when I look at them, 2 times they had to face opponents that had good weapons and a good passing game. I think maybe not just 2, but in 2 occasions, Louisville and USC. This secondary, which is really talented, but they lost Morrison, their first round cornerback.
Right.
Are they when they get into a playoff against a really good passing team? What's that going to look like? So that's question number 1. Question number 2 is, can they pass rush at an elite level? When you start to look at Tennessee and Georgia and South Carolina, if they get in, and Ohio State to a lesser degree, but they have talent up front.
What about
So
Oregon's pass rush?
good. It's good, not elite, I would say.
Okay. I'm just trying to think of it like, do you like Oregon's pass rush still more than Notre Dame's, it sounds like?
Um, maybe slightly. I don't think there's a huge difference, but Penn State's got a better pass rush. I'm just saying when you combine, okay, a couple times against really good passing teams, and maybe it's pass rush and secondary, together. And I think there's a lot of good talent in that secondary, but they've struggled. You can't deny that they've given up a lot of yards. Okay. Now they had the two interceptions late, and they stepped up when they needed to, but USC passed the ball very successfully, right? Um, and then the other thing is on the flip side, the other side of the ball, the weapons concern me. Like, do they have explosive weapons on the outside? And the answer from every tape I've studied is no, they don't. And a quarterback who has gotten better as a passer this year in Riley Leonard, but they're not. They don't scare you on the perimeter. And I looked this past week, and their top two leaders in receiving are the tight end Mitchell Evans and Jeremiah Love, the running back. And so while I think they're a very, very good football team, absolutely deserve to be where they are at this point, considering what they've gone through. And there's been carnage everywhere else, and they've continued to kind of gradually rise up. And I think they're capable of beating a lot of teams, not all teams, but how how great are they? Is because Pollock said he legitimately could see them winning a national championship. That's where I differ. I can go a long way in terms of how good they are, and I could see them winning a game, maybe two games. I don't know that they're a national championship team because of those three areas that I just touched
Yeah, I think I just love the O-line.
on.
I love the running backs, even though one of them
Their
went
running backs
down.
are outstanding.
Yeah, and I think Riley Leonard's been really good, and then the running part of it, I think there's a toughness with them. I think the resume, like, again, it depends. It's back to the politics thing, like, however you wanna shape it, which we're experts in. Like, I can see the bullshit as soon as it's posted, where it's like, "Well, when common opponents this," or whatever, and,
Well,
like,
they
when
have
you're gonna
one
sit there and
one win against a currently ranked
currently,
opponent
right, right,
is
but
an Army at
you're gonna see
24.
people pushing that they have 4, and it's just not gonna be true. I just think I loved that in that game against SC when they needed to be physical, and I'm not even talking about the pick six. Like, at that point, like, SC's trying to do whatever they can. So the score ends up making it a little, well, SC got a late one anyway, so it ends up looking, because it was a competitive football game, and I
By
know
the
the
way,
schedule part of it. Go ahead.
terrible beat.
You
Terrible
didn't
beat.
deserve that. You didn't deserve that.
I mean, I gave
I
it
know you
out to
gave it
all
up.
my FanDuel friends. We're trying to take down FanDuel each and every week. We've been on a run. It's a 7.5 point number. They're down 7 covering, driving going in, and you give up. I want you to think about it. You're covering, and you got a chance now to go tie the game,
Yeah.
or maybe win it if you go for 2. And all of a sudden, you throw 199 yards worth of 2 pick sixes in the last few minutes of the game. That's a bad beat.
I gave out Notre Dame. I needed it bad. So, what are you gonna do?
You feel good about
Okay.
that?
Well, I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know if
you do.
anybody should feel like should be running around. I needed one though. Look, the other thing with Notre Dame's offense and that O-line, they're the number 1. They're actually number 2 in all of college football in yards per carry, but they're the number 1 if you include them as a power 4. I know they're independent, but, like, if
Mhm.
you put them up there with all the other big boys, they're the best yards per carry, and it's by a fairly wide margin over Kansas State, who's number 2. And you're right. I'm not picking them to win a national championship. We could rip apart their schedule like I've ripped apart other teams' schedule. I'm arguing against the idea they have these 4 ranked wins because it's not really all that accurate. As you pointed out, Army's the only one there. And I definitely like Penn State's defensive talent, especially with the Morrison injury, more so than I like Notre Dame's defensive talent right now as well. I mean, look, there's a lot of Penn State games where I'll watch and be like, there's just a ton of dudes here that I do like.
Yeah.
I do like on this team. So it's been different maybe than some other Penn State years.
I'm
Okay,
excited to see that game.
who would you pick? Penn State,
Notre
Notre Dame
Dame.
right now.
Ooh. I think I've been unfairly hard on Penn State. I just don't think that they're at that class. I don't like when
Yeah,
the
but it doesn't sound like you think the Irish are either. It feels like a tier 2 situation for you.
yes, yeah, they're both in that tier 2. and like maybe like 7, 8 spots down in terms of the teams I think that are better than them. Um, Notre Dame, Penn State,
Really struggled
I'm
with
gonna
this one.
take Penn State slightly.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go Penn State, even though I ranked them behind Notre Dame in my rankings, which probably doesn't make any sense, but there you go. The last SEC spot. It sounded like you were pushing for South Carolina. I put him in. The Ole Miss head-to-head thing is a tough one to get past. I do
And
think it's
there's go
okay
ahead.
at this point of the season when things are really, really close. If you just go, hey, guess what? I think this team is better. I like this team better. After the 12 games, I feel better about this. Lenora Sellers, the stuff he does, it gets a little dangerous. It can get a little wild every now and then. But my God, and the way he'll get free from everybody, and then you think you have the angle on him. It's not Lamar stuff because there's still nothing ever like Lamar in college or even really the NFL. I don't know that I'll ever see anything like that again. But Lenoris will get this angle on you, and then he has this extra burst where now all
Yes.
of a sudden you're like, what the hell is going on top of the pass rush and everything else? Maybe South Carolina is kind of this underdoggy pick here. I would go South Carolina, Ole Miss, Alabama. I am so over the Milrow experience with Alabama that I you will not hear me argue for them, even though it looks like the committee still likes them more.
Yeah, I guess I'm confused because I just assumed after the loss that Miami's out. But
I have them out.
I see Heather Dinich come on and be like, I don't know what everyone's talking like Miami's still in. And I don't know how the hell, if you're the
But
committee
see,
member, that you want to put that defense. Listen, I'm an NFL evaluator first and foremost. I'm dying to
hell
see Cam
yeah,
Ward. Yeah, yeah, baby. I'm dying to see Cam Ward against a college football playoff defense.
sure.
It will help the evaluation. But I'm also a college football fan and want to see what's best, and I want to see the best 12 too. I can't live with allowing, not allow. I can't live with giving the Miami the honor of being in the college football playoff with that defense. That defense is atrocious.
They're so bad on defense.
It's
They're
they were up
awful.
21-0. You blink your eye like 2 quarters later, and they've given up 35 points. You almost
I
have to
know. I
try to do that.
I hated my guy Restrepo firing too. I hated that because he's been one of my favorite players this year. I have no issue with Miami, but I think it's funny and credit to Heather Dinich because she got all sorts of shit when she was suggesting that, hey, this SEC team may not be out or a 3-loss. Like all it was is we have to do a better job of like, you know what this could look like at the end and the stakes being raised these last couple weeks where I think it was kind of ridiculous, like during Michigan, Ohio State, when they're saying like everything's on the line. You're like, except it isn't, because Ohio State's still going to be in the playoff.
Right,
They're
but
going to lose to Michigan, and they're still going to be in the playoff. Now, what you tell me to shut up is that everybody's watching Georgia Tech in a game that nobody would be paying attention to with Georgia's 2 losses. So I kind of lose the argument on like the excitement part of it because there's more stuff that actually matters. I just think it's ridiculous in the years where it was LSU, Bama facing off against each other, meaning like this team, whoever wins this game, that team has a chance to play in the national championship. And if you lose, it is over. I like those stakes. I like the Michigan, Ohio State stakes being different. I don't like Ohio State losing and then being like, oh, whatever, 2 losses, doesn't matter. We're just back into the playoffs. So we've already heard that rant from me. But Dinich, I thought, got all sorts of heat for going like, hey, have an open mind about a couple of these different things. And now she's doing it with Miami when the same thing's happening with a different team in a different conference.
my here's my issue though. If Miami's out, then we have a great discussion. Alabama, South Carolina. I don't think it's Ole Miss, but some people will argue for Ole Miss. I don't think you can finish the season that way, have the losses that they had, and still get in. Okay. So for me, it was Alabama versus South Carolina. And I'll come back to that in a second because I'll make the argument for South Carolina. But I want you to understand if Miami's still in, I think if my math is right, it's a moot point.
Yes.
Like Oregon, Texas, Penn State, Georgia, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Tennessee. Then you keep Miami in the mix. Then the winner of SMU, Clemson, is in as the ACC
Right.
champion.
Yep.
Indiana apparently is still in. Like In what world Indiana and Miami deserve to be in the college football playoff and some of these other teams don't? But like that's the world we're living in based off of last week's college football playoff rankings. We'll see what
I
happens
have
on
Indiana
Tuesday night.
in over Miami. I had them 12th.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter what you have. I have Miami out. I'd like to see Indiana out, but they're both getting in according to what the rankings were last week and what Dinich is now saying, and nobody has better insight into all of it. So those are the teams. That's 10 right there. Okay. Then you got Boise State is going to be 11, or I guess UNLV is a possibility if they win that
Sure.
championship. And then the 12th spot will be the Big 12 champion, right?
Well, the way, again, I'm kind of going off of the AP, but like if you look back, I mean, the committee really liked Miami. They still had them in front of Georgia, which I think is so brutal. Like,
They
how
had them
could
at
you
6
look
and
at those?
Georgia 7 and Tennessee 8.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
I
I
don't
just
know.
laid it out for you. If Miami's in, there's no discussion about Alabama, South Carolina, or Ole Miss. There isn't. There's not enough room.
I don't know if Bama's going to win. Based on what the committee's been doing here, they're going to like Bama over South Carolina, and they're going to have the head-to-head to point to, and that's totally fine. And
Yeah,
I'm
Bama
ignoring
has a
head-to-head on both
two
of it.
point win
Right.
head to head over South Carolina. They also have a one spot in the strength of ranking edge over South Carolina. In South Carolina's favor, though, they lost to Bama by only 2 points in Tuscaloosa in a game they were dogs, but 3 touchdown dogs, and that was 8 weeks ago. Okay. They have the slight edge in strength of schedule. South Carolina does over Alabama. They have no ugly losses like Alabama does with Vandy, and more importantly, the blowout against Oklahoma. The LSU loss included terrible officiating that could have changed that game, and we forget that Sellers was injured in that game in the first half. And most importantly, South Carolina, we're trying to get in the best teams right now. South Carolina is the hotter team, has played better down the stretch, and 2 ranked opponents they've beaten in the last 3 weeks. So if Alabama gets in, it's because of the brand, period.
No, they'll say the head-to-head. They're going to say the head-to-head, and they're going to say that they don't Alabama. I mean, honestly, the Oklahoma loss
But
is
even like
worse.
when you talk about like FanDuel and all these places in Las Vegas, you give 3 points. It's like it's under. You give 3 points for home field advantage. They lost by 2.
No, I understand. I am with you on South Carolina, and the fact that they had to go a little Robbie Ashford experiment during that LSU game should be even more
That's what I'm
credit
saying.
towards South Carolina. But based on the way the rankings have been going, they're going to say Alabama won the head-to-head. And maybe they still like Miami enough. Miami being in over those SEC teams to me would be a joke. That's where I'll sound like an SEC apologist.
Miami doesn't have a win over a currently ranked opponent. I'm not asking for a response. It's just a fact.
The AP dropped him to 14. And when you start doing some of the strength of record and all that stuff, like Alabama's still number 4 in the ESPN FBI. I mean, give me a.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. The FBI
I
get
credit
out of
anybody
here.
for trying something a little different or whatever, but like Alabama was number 2 and then they dropped to 4. And you're like, so you're going to start citing some of these things? All right. Do you have early leans on the championship games? Can we make that quick without like a full breakdown? Because I know you're going to do a full breakdown on the McShay show.
It scares me that FanDuel's got only a 3.5 point spread. I'm not even talking personnel. Like obviously, Oregon is the much better football team in my mind, and I think most.
You think it's just
because
because it's an Indy?
I think it might be because it's an Indy. Because
That has a lot to do with
I'm
it.
guessing Penn State's going to be better represented.
The Ducks travel though, so it's
They
not
do.
like,
But that, like, I was expecting 6 and a half, right? And 9 out of 10 times when the line's like, they're begging you. They're begging you.
begging you to take the Ducks.
They're begging you to take the Ducks, right? So that game scares me.
Same exact thing. Like I thought it'd be 6.5, maybe 6. And then I was like, God.
Mm-hmm.
What about the rematch? Is there a chance Georgia's just an awful matchup for Texas?
Yes. But I don't think you're going to see, 10 sacks, 15 tackles for loss, 4 turnovers. Like
Ewers got a break. in the game. You don't see that a lot. It wasn't that he was benched. We're just going to give you a break.
It was
And then,
it was a mental health break. It truly was, if you want to break it down.
like, if you want to have a cigarette, Quinn,
It
go
was like
ahead.
HR walked into his office and was like, listen, yeah, grab a cigarette. There's the couch. Take a mental health break. We'll come back to you in a day or two, and you'll resume your duties here in the corporation. I,
I don't it's hard to watch that game and be like, "Yeah, I'll pick the other team this time." But Carson Beck continues. Like, if you want to make the argument against Georgia, be like, "What are you actually backing?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm backing that they went
let's not
3 and
forget
2 in
Carson
those
Beck threw
5
three
games."
picks in that game and was not very good. Carson Beck
No.
is a hell of a lot better, more confident.
You think so? I
Understand
didn't think he was that great against Tech. Did you? I mean, I think he
second
woke
half I
up,
did. Second half I thought he was
but
really good. I thought he was
that
really
first
good.
half, I was like, "What is going on with this guy?"
They're a team that they like to play one half of games. I can tell you that much.
Is there anything to it takes you a while to recover
I'm
after
interested to see,
UMass?
do we see more of Arch in this game?
Yes.
Mensch
I mean, we
Mensch
already
on our
saw
show
it,
the
and
other night. Mensch on our show the other night made a really good point. Tim Tebow vibes when Arch comes in. Go back to that Chris Leak freshman year. There's a certain level of like energy, his mobility. I think, and I think we saw it in this Texas A&M game. I think we're going to see potentially a little bit more of him against Georgia, and designed, not like, because not. I mean, it could be because you were struggles. If he struggles again the second time around against Georgia, but I do think there's going to be a little bit more Arch in this game.
I would agree. I think you better bring it out and show it, and I think we already saw maybe the teasing part of it against A&M to have Georgia thinking about that. Do you have anything on Sam Levitt, the freshman? He's got a gold chain on in his profile pic on ESPN.com. So that's all I
You
need to
love the
know.
picks.
What do you
Uh,
mean?
the I don't. I feel like I always see on your X feed. You're always like, you'll pop up some weird old pic of somebody.
Well, that's the Nakobe Dean fedora thing. Just try to because Nakobe Dean was the kind of guy I was like, he's not going to be good in the NFL because he's undersized, because he was probably one of my favorite
It took him a
college
minute. I was
linebackers.
nervous, but
It did take a bit, but I mean, he was just so good. But sometimes it's just size. But it looks like now things are going to work out for him. No, I feel like when it's Sunday night or Monday night football or Thursday night football, I know everything I need to know about a player's personality, the way they introduce themselves.
mm-hmm,
Okay, I've
agreed.
said this for years. Like, I can tell exactly. There's a reason
What
why the
kind of
old
hang
lineman
that
just
guy would be? Everything.
right, right. I mean, like, the more sauce you throw into that, the more difficult I think you would be as a roommate. But if you're a freshman at Arizona State, right? If
You're
you're
not wrong.
if you're a kid out of Westland, Oregon, and you find a way to get a gold chain in your profile pic, like, how do I pick against you?
Yeah, he's been playing well.
Okay. Um,
I like
what
that
about
Arizona
SMU
State team.
Clemson?
I can see Clemson winning that.
That was the only one spread wise where I felt like
What's the
if you're
number in that
getting
game?
Clemson plus 2.5, you kind of have to.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let me
Yeah.
finish up here. That I know you're going to do a much bigger breakdown. We weren't going to do a full conference championship game breakdown here. I just was trying to get into McShay's head a little bit about the early leans. All right, let's throw a scenario at you, okay? Because I've seen this one out there on the internet,
Okay.
which is crazy. If you look at the standings right now in the NFL and you go league wide, there's a lot of work for the Bears to end up with the number 1 pick. They're 4-8. There's a bunch of teams with 2 wins. There's a handful of teams with 3 wins. Saints, Cincinnati. So it's not likely that the Bears, even though with a difficult, tough, redundant, difficult remaining straight in the schedule, it's not likely, even with all those things, they would end up with the number 1 pick. However,
Mm-hmm.
we don't have any rules here. If the Bears were to get the number 1 pick, Shadora's on the board, maybe it even means you get Dion. What would you do?
I don't think you're getting Dion. I would, depending on the information you have and everything that leads up to the draft, I'd probably draft him
And
with
get rid of
no
Caleb?
intention of making Shador my quarterback. I've got my guy. I would And the difference in talent level and the future of those two is like it's hard to overstate. Okay, I really like Shador, best pure passer. Think he's got a chance to be a solid pro, but Caleb's got a chance to be special still. And we've seen a lot more glimpses in the last few weeks than we did earlier in the season. I draft him only because now I've got the leverage. Because Coach Prime is absolutely going to dictate where Shador goes. No question in my mind. He's stated it. He's leaning into it. He's tripling down on it. And it will happen. So if I draft him at number one, no matter if Chicago or Jacksonville or whoever it is, if I draft him at number one, now I'm in control. Now I dictate not where he goes, but what the price is going to be. And if it's Chicago or any other team, I'm looking at this year's draft, and it's not like the last couple of years where there's a clear-cut top 5, top 7 players, or clear. Like, you can get pretty close at pick 6 or 7 or 8 what you can get at number 1. And so I take him, trade to the team that Coach Prime has designated for Shador, and now I'm going to get a boatload of picks because I have the leverage. And if you want him, you got to come and pay me to get him. That's what I would do.
I'll give Shador this, man.
It's a better answer than you expected. Admit it.
I think I really wanted to break down like the idea that some people would be like, would Shador be a better prospect than Caleb? And I can't fathom.
Well, I answered that.
Yeah, you were definitive that there's no one that does evaluation. Well, can't speak for everybody, right? I mean, somebody would maybe grade Shador.
I haven't come across anyone who sees the same future for Shador as they see for Caleb, and that's not even that big. It's not like a knock on Shador necessarily. It's more of what everyone thinks that Caleb can become.
Yeah. And I would agree with that part of it. And another thing with Shador, like, you want to talk about doing it on your own. They're still the 3rd worst rushing team in college football.
Oof.
Like, you never have to worry about it. And yet he's still putting up these numbers. And if it weren't for Travis Hunter, I think Shador would have a much better chance at the Heisman. Like, maybe I agree. Maybe even the favorite.
He's been awesome this year. He really has been.
Look, I felt like the beginning of the year, I was saying the same stuff from last year. And I went, this isn't happening. And then they completely turned it around.
Yeah.
Completely turned it around. And they deserve a lot of credit for that. But I would agree with you. I think some of the theoretical kind of fun stuff of like, what if the Bears ended up with the number 1 pick? You take Shador and then trade Caleb. And it's like, why would you want to get rid of Caleb after everything that you've seen him go through this year and how well he's played for really good stretches here in the second half of the season? All right. You can check out the McShay Show on Spotify, Ringer Podcasts, 3 days a week, Saturday night recaps. So you guys will be going all night then after all the conference championship games on Saturday, correct?
Yeah, right. Fired up.
Awesome.
I'll call you to see if you want to join again.
No, I'll jump in. I'll jump in on that one.
Ooh. All right. We got him locked in.
Spice it up. All right, let's go. Talk to you soon, buddy.
All right, my man.